Have you let it get you yet? People there are saying how bad's it gonna get? And I've been calling to the sky, please don't let more bullets fly. Have you heard the talk of the cities and the towns? There's a fear from the inside and the toil all around. And I've been hoping for my help, find the cure to come and save.
Welcome to Critical Mass TV. Thank you for tuning in. This is the show that understands the common threads that weave through both the worst aspects of human civilization and the most glorious. If we are honest and understand that the madness, as former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright calls it, the madness in the world today, if we understand that it is a direct result of appeasing the world's ruling class billionaires and paving the way for their corporations to continue processing the world, then we must also understand that we in our masses are the only force that can counterbalance the cult of greed and reintroduce sanity and hope into our future achievements. It is Sunday, August 3rd, 2014, and we are broadcasting live from the outstanding VCAM studios in beautiful Burlington, Vermont. Aren't we lucky? Please remember that the opinions expressed on the show are those of the speaker and not necessarily those of Vermont Community Access Media, even though I think they should be. Tonight, we are going to continue our discussions about what I call the gilded ostrich and how it can keep its head forever buried in the cash. Are you ready for some mixed mental arts? Do you have any intellectual self-defense? To help us further understand what life is like for the Palestinian people, we will show excerpts of an interview by Danny Weiss with Ayman Nijim, who lives near the West Bank. This interview was shot by tonight's guest, Arthur Hines, local videographer, activist, and good friend to myself and Critical Mass TV. I would also like to thank Jim Kelty, without whom we wouldn't have a show, and Jeremy Harple and the Aerolites for their generosity in letting us use Have You Read the News as the show's theme song. Last weekend, I just saw the Aerolites at the Jeezum Crow Festival in Jay. They opened up the festival and were just freaking amazing. So check them out at aerolites.com. Okay, on with the show. We're talking war and occupation, greed and dehumanization, media bias and propaganda. And do you think we've bitten off a big enough chunk tonight? So here I go. All right, Dr. Mona El-Farah, an MD and associate of the Middle East Children's Alliance, appearing on Democracy Now!, called for an end to the military assault on Gaza by declaring, "We are human beings." Of course human beings do live in Gaza. Obvious, right? The unspoken implication is much more profound. For the people of Gaza, it seems as if we have ignored the fact and that we respect and support the hyper-violent Zionists at the Gazans' expense. This brings us to an important question. How can we ignore the basic dignity and humanity of an entire people? And what does this tell us about ourselves? Of course, we live in a domination and control system made necessary by the relentless pursuit of power and wealth by the world's ruling elites. We are pitted against each other in many ways to drive conflict and make our domination easier. Conflict in and of itself, sorry, I lost my place here. Conflict in and of itself is not the issue. It's the image that we internalize of the humans on the other side that is critical. Dehumanizing the people that one is exploiting or exterminating is part and parcel to the process. Michael Nagler, in his book, The Nonviolence Handbook, A Guide for Practical Action, explains that conflict escalates or moves towards increasing violence according to the degree of dehumanization in the situation. Violence doesn't occur without dehumanization. It is important for us as citizens then to recognize the motives behind this dehumanization and to not participate in it. Native Americans, who like Palestinians are guilty by proximity, to use a kind of a horrible Pentagon term, were mainly guilty of one thing, that is, being in the way of a more aggressive group seeking to take their land and lives by any means possible. If one looks at the media coverage throughout our genocidal rampage on indigenous Americans, their blatant dehumanization is first and foremost, and that would be in the newspaper coverage in the 19th century. This propaganda element is crucial. It is difficult to get people to slaughter their neighbors if they respect them as human beings. Do we see Albert Einstein's friendly universe as he understood it? If we see an unfriendly universe, we see it as populated by unfriendly beings. In a dehumanized world of scarcity and greed, even if it is an illusion, we are much more susceptible to allowing horrific behavior to protect ourselves from evil others. Remember your humanity and forget the rest, Einstein said. Stephanie Van Hook, in her article, Why Being Human Matters, states, look around you at ads, TV programs, and the news, and you will find that there is one image of the human being that dominates, and he's not very friendly. He is violent, greedy, hateful, and only happy when things are going well for him. He's really quite superficial. His face is ecstatic when he saves on car insurance, and his voice is monotonous when he reports on war. He's obsessed with violence and hungry for more. We see and hear these images between 2,000 to 5,000 times per day in urban areas worldwide. Eventually, we internalize it. We come to think that this is who we are, too. We see it so often, our minds stop distinguishing between ourselves and what is being projected at us. Knowing firsthand the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, I can see the impact of violence on my own psyche. I would wager, though, that the deep anxiety and trauma caused by inflicting pain on others is actually a hopeful sign. For I hope everyone realizes that the opposite, deep interconnections, being meaningfully helpful and working together for the positive, provide some of the best experiences and feelings we will ever have. We do recognize the Palestinians as human beings. And I think we will begin with the interview conducted 2 weeks ago with Ayman Nijim that Arthur Hines shot and conducted by Danny Weiss. So could you play that interview for us, Jim?
Ayman Nijim, who's a Palestinian human rights activist, on a speaking tour. Right now, Gaza is undergoing an onslaught by Israel. The bombs are falling. Ayman, can you tell us about the humanitarian crisis that's going on right now?
What's going on right now in Gaza is a slow-motion genocide, is collective punishment against 1.8 million Palestinians living in a small part of land, which is 365 square kilometers. What's going on right now in Gaza is a slow-motion genocide, is collective punishment against 1.8 million Palestinians living in a small part of land, which is 365 square kilometers. what is going right now is the start of ground invasion in Gaza Strip. Right now, when we are talking with you, they announced that they gonna invade Gaza by land troops. So what's going on right now, as I told you, it is the steps in the destructive process of the occupation against the Palestinian people, against their right to live, against their right of self-determination. Again, the Palestinians now in Gaza Strip are being incarcerated, besieged since 2007. They are under strict siege by the occupation forces. You know, until right now, there are 225 Palestinians were killed, including women and children. We have 45 children were killed in the last couple of weeks, with women. And the situation is getting more worse, and the situation is very horrendous, and the occupation starts to speed up the escalation and to take the international coverage for attacking the Palestinian people. Today, while I was speaking with you, the Israeli Knesset and the Israeli ministers, they asked to push Gaza people to the center of the cities. So, because it is a kind of psychological war, so to intimidate, to terrorize the Palestinian people, and that we are in our step to invade Gaza Strip. So you have the residents of Gaza Strip, you have to go to the centers of the cities, because we will invade it sooner or later. So it is a kind of psychological war. If we want to talk about the infrastructure in Gaza Strip, since 2007, when the siege started in Gaza Strip, until now, we have 3 major offensives against Gaza Strip. We have, as it is dubbed by the Israeli occupation forces, the first one was Operation Cast Lead, and Operation Pillars of Cloud, and then Operation, as they dubbed it, Protective Edge. So in the last just 7 years, Gaza was under ongoing attacks from the Israeli naval forces, from the Israeli aerial forces, from each part of the Israeli industry, military industry, against the Palestinian people, against the armless Palestinian people. But so there is a humanitarian infrastructure, a humanitarian crisis in Gaza since 2007. You can't imagine there is no drinking water for the Palestinian in Gaza to have drinking water for their kids. The amount of trauma for the kids was doubled highly, increasingly. So there are some kinds of occupation that you can't sometimes follow the track of these occupation tactics to kill the Palestinian, but they want to not to kill you. They want you to put you on a diet, as one of the Israeli ministers said, that we will not kill Palestinians in Gaza, but we will put them in a diet in 2006. So it is a part of slow motion genocide for 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza Strip in just a small part of land. It is a part of collective punishment against Palestinians. I am against collective punishment because it is a slow motion genocide for civilians in their land, in their indigenous land, and they want to wipe them out of the map. Before I speak, I just want to mention that when we say that it is collective punishment, that means that the Palestinians are, there are some Palestinians are guilty of attacking Israel. But we call it slow motion genocide against Palestinian people, because in terms of the military balance, you can't compare Gaza Strip, which is a small part of land, with Israel, which is funded every year with $3.1 billion from a lot of countries. I mean, and it was supported by Europe and by United States, and was supported by a lot of countries. So it is not our topic, but our topic is that just to come to terms that Gaza is under occupation. Gaza is not, it is not a conflict between two parties who are equal to each other. No. It is a conflict, it is an occupation between Israeli occupation, who are the oppressor, and the Palestinian people who are the oppressed. And these are the cycle between the oppressor and the oppressed. So sometimes we have to deal with the media manipulation of terminology, that a conflict. No, it is a struggle for human rights. It is a struggle for self-determination. People are looking for their own rights, are looking to having a good life for themselves and for their kids. In regard to the justification that they will want to spoil the unity government in Palestine, you know, because Israel for a long time and all the colonial powers in the history, they will not accept any unified occupied people, because it is a kind of divide and conquer policy that we have to divide them so we can control them. Mm-hmm. So it is against Israeli strategic goals. It is against Israeli strategic goals to have a puppet governments. They need puppet governments so they can control it by remote control. They can guide it by remote control. So Israel is against a unity government, even if it is internal issues of the Palestinians, but they are trying to stigmatize the Palestinians as terrorists, and try to manipulate with the media in terms of Islamophobia, that those are terrorists and we have to fight them. Just to mention that those that the terrorist idea was in South Africa. They were labeling the South African with terrorists, and those were freedom fighters. I mean, it doesn't make any sense that you label someone a terrorist and he is fighting for his self-determination, that he is fighting for a betterment of his life, for to have a good drinking water, to have a reopening of the crossing, to lift the siege on Gaza Strip. So the people in Palestine, in Gaza Strip especially, they are looking for a good life. They are looking for lifting the siege on Palestine, in Gaza Strip. They want an airport and seaport. We spent all of our life that we don't have seaport or airport. We just have airport for a couple of years when it was destroyed by Israel. In 2003, we have Rafah International Airport, and it was destroyed by Israel in 2003. They don't want us to smile. They don't want us to be happy. Why? Because it is a part of the Zionist curriculum in the schools that we are the chosen people, and we are superior than others, and they are little snakes. You can imagine, like, with the drones all of the day, with warning explosions in the night, with people don't have electricity. In all of my speeches, in all of my talks, I say it is a slow motion genocide. It is, and Gaza is a concentration camp. Gaza is a concentration camp because if you just compare between the two sides, you will find that Gaza is surrounded by walls. Gaza people can't leave their own strip. In Gaza Strip, they can't leave. They can't go through crossings, which are now under strict measures. So they can't go to the sea. If they can't go for fishing, it is just for 5 nautical miles. If they can't travel to West Bank, they can't. for me, as for instance, I am from Gaza. I grew up in Gaza Strip. I can't leave Gaza Strip to the West Bank, which is 20 minutes away. I can't go to visit Jerusalem or Bethlehem, where Jesus Christ was born. I can't go there, and I am Palestinian, and my passport is Palestinian. And if you are a Zionist, you can come in just one day, and you can reside and settle in my country. You can just one day go there, and they will give you a loan, and you will have a big house and decent life. So it is about racial discrimination. It is about racial segregation of those few people in the world who can control our life and can dehumanize the Palestinian people in Gaza Strip and the West Bank. But we are talking today about what's going in Gaza Strip, especially. Yeah. In terms of active non-violence, the Palestinian people used active non-violence before Mahatma Gandhi used it. Because we lived all of our life under occupation, under mandate Britain till 1948. So Palestinians were using active non-violence since the beginning of the conflict, since Sykes Picot. We are using it.
Absolutely.
And like if you go to the books of history, you will see how there were demonstrations against Britain and against the Turkish and against all of those Zionist gangs. Active non-violence, we use it as a peaceful way to speak up against oppression. And in Belayeen, which is a city in the West Bank, in Belayeen they call it Mecca of active non-violence because there are a lot of international solidarity members who are coming to the West Bank to demonstrate peacefully, non-violently against the occupation, against the separation, apartheid wall in the West Bank. So Palestinians, we used to have demonstrations, sit in hunger strikes, and the prisoners now, we have a lot of prisoners, political prisoners in the Israeli jails, and they are under hunger strikes. Until now, they are under hunger strike. So active non-violence is good for our struggle, our long-time struggle with the occupation. But there's something we have to be careful. Active non-violence, that doesn't mean that you will be you gonna surrender to the occupier and to the oppressor, and he will manipulate these your active non-violence tactics for his financial and political gains. Sometimes under the international law, you have a right to defend yourself and to defend your people, and it is your right to defend your people, especially under a heavy militarily Israel. They are killing in each minute you will find a kid or a child were killed in Gaza Strip. Just to mention that Gaza Strip is under slow motion, is under killing, is under onslaught by Israel, and it is just, as I told you, it is just a small, no one like here. There are some people who imagine that Gaza is like a republic or a big city. No, it is a small one. It doesn't make any sense for any Palestinians or any international guy who've been in Palestine or in Gaza, because they knew that Gaza is like is made up of big houses, and like 50 or to 60 people are living in this house. It is one of the most densely populated area on the earth.
It's a humanitarian nightmare, a humanitarian disaster of what's going on. And the act of nonviolence will only go so far. I mean, if you have to use a hunger strike in prison as your only weapon, then, you know, it's a horrible thing that you've got to stop eating because the conditions are so bad, the situation is so bad, and that's your only weapon. Now, something has got to change, and I believe the American people and people of the world have got to speak out against this. Do you have any solutions about what we can do?
I mean, you will not invent anything. You will just abide by the moral values and about the humanitarian values and about the principles of the founding fathers of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You have to abide by the United States Constitution, which is about equality, about against racism, against discrimination. You have a history against racism and against racism in Palestine. You have a history against racism in the United States, and most of the American people are familiar with racism, with occupation, and New England, for instance, was under the occupation, British occupation, and it was liberated in Boston. I mean, what we are asking is just to abide by the moral values of the founding father of the United States, and that the United States was the first country over the planet to say that the existence of a Jewish state, they say the existence of a Jewish state against on other people's land in 1947. It was said in 1947, the partition plan will be against the moral values and national interest of the United States. It was, I think, by the United States State Department. He was the chairman of the Near East office. He was in Turkey in that time. I said, that what's going on is against the moral values and the national interest of the United States, and the people here can do to ask their congressperson to write for them letters, and that we are looking for helping or assisting our brothers and sisters in Palestine who are under slow motion genocide, and that Palestine can't be separated from the humanitarian community, from the human being community. And as brothers and sisters, we ask everyone just to act according to his beliefs and to his values, that Palestine should be in his heart, should be in his mind, in his soul, because Palestine issue, it was for a long time. It is a deep-rooted struggle for self-determination, and it doesn't make any sense that we are in the 21st century and the Palestinian people are under occupation, under occupation, with a lot of lies and justification, and terrorizing them, stigmatizing them as terrorists. That's the now. It is a call up for everyone, that belong to the human race, that he should support Palestinian people in their struggle for self-determination with any means possible to achieve their dream of having Jerusalem as a capital, and to have a viable Palestinian state. We don't need like a Palestinian state like as we are begging the occupier to give us Palestinian state. We need a Palestinian state with airport, with seaport. We want to build our life. I don't think that it is not our right to build our life, to establish a good life for our kids and children. Our kids now, right now we have 25,000 children who are need specialized trauma treatment in Gaza Strip. They need a specialized psychosocial treatment. So we have a lot to deal with. So you just ask your fellow human being, your brothers and sisters to move forward for their struggle for human rights, for good life for their kids, for a simple, basic human rights.
Absolutely.
We are looking for having all our crossing opened. I mean, it is, you can't imagine people are asking to have their crossing opened. Like, it is not a big deal.
Right.
People want to live. People want to go to swim in the sea. As you know, yesterday there were 4 kids were killing on the beach. It wasn't a strategic military target, and it was.
It was a wanton murder, basically.
I mean, on all Gaza, it is murder.
It is.
But yesterday there was a media to cover that.
Exactly.
Yeah, like,
it all is murder.
So first of all, we had a little technical difficulty there with the video portion of that, but the important part, which is Ayman Nijim speaking about the plight of the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank, was very well still, came across very well. It just. Hi, Arthur, by the way. How you doing? Thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate that, and a good job on the video. Sometimes you have technical difficulties. Can you imagine, I mean, how incredible the stories are? If you're a journalist and you are reporting the facts on the ground in that part of the world, and you didn't have the bias, the pressure on you to conform to a certain viewpoint, he covered so much material about the lack of just basic human rights that the Palestinian people in Gaza have, the fact that they see themselves as in a concentration camp, and we were just mentioning now in the last week the one major power plant they have has been hit by Israeli munitions. The water treatment facilities have been hit by munitions. The stories in there, if you are willing to get in there, and you don't even have to dig, but then my point being that we hear so little about that kind of day-to-day plight in our media, where we get all of our information from.
Well, and that's really what enables the policy to continue. It's just completely, the Palestinian situation is completely ignored. I think, a great majority of Americans who only watch mainstream TV will never hear anything about it. They hear Israel as victims and Israel as attacked. They probably have no clue that Palestinians are in the largest open-air prison in the world.
Yeah.
That they don't, even when they're not being directly attacked as they are now, they don't have clean water. They don't have schools. The electricity is on very short time each day. There's bad malnutrition because Israel controls the borders and will not even allow enough food in.
And this isn't the best of times you're describing
Yeah,
now. Not when they're under
not
attack.
when they're attacked. And now, Israel hits the water supply. What do you call that? I'd call it terrorism.
Yeah, it would be a state terrorist attack. I mean, you're obviously trying to induce terror in a population. I guess, you'd have to have a pretty creative mindset to think about what's the eventual outcome when you're treating a large population of people like that. I mean, what the heck is the outcome that you're trying to get down the road? If you're trying to inspire endless future resistance to your oppression and your occupation, then maybe that would be a function, attacking them in this way and mistreating them at these levels would be, something you would do.
Well,
are they trying to abuse them so bad that they eventually just go away?
Well, I think they're counting on, like I said, the media going along, which it does to a very large extent, and they're counting on the rest of the world to go along and just, ignore the war crimes.
Yeah.
And ignore this, this, as you said, slow motion genocide in this concentration camp. In other wars, when they're attacked and the bombs start dropping, they flee across the border. They can at least get away from it.
As
Here
a
they
refugee.
can't even leave. There's nowhere to go. It's one of the most densely populated areas in the world, and there's nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. And every time they've tried hiding, in a school, or tried, just retreating, getting some semblance of safety, and it was a UN school, was bombed. The civilians had gone there to seek some safety. Israel has bombed it.
Mm-hmm.
And synagogues, mosques.
Yeah. And what we're talking about here is the level of bias, or the fact that there is bias in the reporting that you and I are getting from our corporate U.S. media, biased heavily and quite obviously in the Israelis' favor. Their victims are worthy victims. The victims on the Palestinian side are less worthy. Like just in the reporting about the tunnels that the Palestinians have excavated and dug over the years, we're talking about the open-air prison camp or concentration camp, as Ayman is describing it. The tunnel systems, I don't have firsthand experience, but a friend of mine traveled to Palestine on multiple occasions, and the people, he's a U.S. citizen, he's not Palestinian, and he was able to, after several weeks of openly relating with Palestinian folks and living with them, he was given a tour of several different tunnels, and actually, I think these tunnels entered Egypt, not Israel proper. And but if an intelligent, industrious group of people is trapped and they can't move in any direction, it's logical for them to excavate these tunnels.
Well, and therefore, at least in part for trading of goods,
Sure.
because the borders are blocked, and they're not even allowed to trade common goods, food.
Right.
So they have to literally go underground just to do any kind of trade, get enough food.
Right, which seems, I would do it. I would have my shovel out there within minutes of being trapped in that situation. Any rational people would. They also could potentially bring in the materials that would make some sort of a rocket or some sort of a means to defend themselves, which would also be a logical use when you're trapped and you're feeling like your existence is threatened. Even under UN charters, people that are occupied militarily have a legal right in international law to defend themselves.
Yeah, but of course you never hear that. It's always Israel's right to defend themselves. But they're creating this. They're attacking their own prison now.
Yeah.
And this actually, I just came across an article today by Glenn Greenwald.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of terrorism, it just looks, factually at the number of civilians versus military killed. And of course the numbers, speak for themselves. But here, in Israel, Israelis killed 3 civilians to 53 military. That's
so 3 Israeli
about
civilians.
5% are civilians. 95% are military targets.
And the number is under 60.
Under 60,
total
yeah.
people.
In Palestine, 826 civilians to 275 military, or supposedly military. Anyone
Which
even
would be Hamas.
Hamas? Well, even anyone, as he says, even anyone defending their home when they're attacked is labeled
Would all of a
labeled
sudden
a
be a
militant. So even if
combatant.
you include people defending their homes as military or as so-called terrorists, it's 3/4 are civilian and 1/4 are military.
Right, and thousands of Palestinians both killed and injured, and hundreds or 100 on the Israeli side, which is very typical in the previous series of conflicts over the last 10 or 15 years. Those ratios are very common. The Israelis are using really heavy industrial war machinery, and the Palestinians are, building those homemade
Yeah, pretty
unguided rockets and
primitive
using
rockets.
firearms and whatnot. So we have a short video here about media bias on this particular issue. Jim, could you play that media bias video for us, please?
So many Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since the Second Intifada that it equates to one being killed every 3 days for the last 13 years. In fact, 2 Palestinian teens were just gunned down broad daylight on camera.
The killing of those 2 Palestinian teens by Israel was caught on multiple cameras. And I'll talk more about the context of those murders after I show you a clip from this highly recommended video, which I recommend you watch and click the like button.
It's clear that the New York Times is engaged in a whitewash of the real sources of this crisis and doing deep disservice to its readers. Beyond that, Abby, I see very little discussion of this crisis and the real roots of it in progressive media.
Right.
And your show is one of the few shows that I see discussing it, even in the alternative online media.
And let's get into that, Max, because according to the Ministry of Information in Ramallah, so many Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces since the Second Intifada that it equates to one being killed every 3 days for the last 13 years. And in fact, 2 Palestinian teens were just gunned down broad daylight on camera last month. I didn't hear the White House issuing condolences for them. Why do you think this latest tragedy is being framed as different even by alternative media sources, suggesting that because Israeli teens are dead, it somehow makes the playing field equal?
Well, we're hearing a lot of rhetoric about a cycle of violence, as if one side isn't the oppressor and the other side isn't oppressed. And we're seeing undue focus on the 3 Israeli victims. Israel, while it rampages through the West Bank, through Jerusalem and Gaza, portrays itself as the victim. And that was Netanyahu's intention from the beginning. That's partly why I think the details of this crime were concealed from the Israeli public. It was to allow Netanyahu to milk this crime for all it was worth, to portray Israel as a victim. And as we've seen time and time again in U.S. media, Israeli Jews are the worthy victims, while Palestinians are unworthy victims. They're unworthy of being humanized.
Those are good points as far as how the U.S. media framed the story of the kidnappings and downplays and suppresses the track record of Israel's aggression. And if you look at how the U.S. media had framed the kidnapping story, you could see why most of the audience would never even think that those kidnappings could be revenge for the murder of 2 Palestinian teens. So basically, Israel murders Palestinians. If anyone responds to that, then Israel collectively punishes Palestinians, bombing and killing large number of Palestinians. And the media plays along with this as if Israel isn't the aggressor. Israel was caught on camera murdering Palestinians, and then CNN gives a platform to Israel apologists to make claims that those videos were faked. And then when the kidnapping happened just a few weeks later, you don't even get an inkling that that kidnapping could be a reaction to something Israel has done. U.S. media acted like that kidnapping had no motive. A CNN cameraman caught the Israeli soldier firing the shot, but I didn't see CNN do a follow-up about how the man whose store security cameras captured those shootings. He was intimidated. The Israeli soldiers showed up at his business, confiscated the video equipment, and they started threatening the man and his family. There was very little coverage of how Israeli soldiers were threatening the store owner whose video cameras captured the murders. I didn't see it mentioned at all on TV. And how does that just happen? That Israel just happens to use live fire against unarmed Palestinian teens. So Israel outright murders Palestinians. That's captured on camera. It's a horrible emotional trauma to the Palestinian people. And we're supposed to believe that no one would react at all? That when the kidnapping happened, no one questioned and said, could this have been motivated by those murders that Palestinians saw on video? Here's an article that was published on the same day of the kidnapping of those 3 Israelis. The deaths of the 2 Palestinian youths killed a few weeks ago outside Alpha prison during the Nakba Day demonstration have proved harder for Ramallah than any other West Bank killing over the past few years. So we should think about that there was not only the cynical exploitation of the kidnapping, there was also the odd framing as if there was no motive for the kidnapping, and the impact of watching Palestinian teens being killed on camera. Those shootings were really downplayed, the impact that had on the Palestinian people. Remember, this is the video where CNN actually caught on camera the Israeli soldier shooting one of the Palestinian teens. This was a major story. And this is a video that Palestinians had to see. You don't hear those kidnappings being referred to as revenge kidnappings or questioning, could these kidnappings be revenge? You see how the U.S. media frames things in a certain way? Look at the links in the video description because Fair has a good story about how the U.S. media continually frames this as it's always Israel reacting. Meanwhile, the reality is Israel is the aggressor. It's Palestinian people reacting to Israeli aggression. U.S. media is really pushing a distorted view of reality by suppressing that fact. They suppress the history and they also distort recent events. So like I said, I recommend this video. Please share this video with others and that will promote the other video.
So that video very well documents the structural and institutional bias that's being shown in our coverage, whether it's the New York Times or CNN, and it shows some of the pressures behind the reasons for that coverage. One thing to me that's really important is like Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman would do, but look at the structural reasons why that's occurring. Israel, of course, is an ally of the United States. And on our last show, we talked about very quickly about how when the regime of the Shah in Iran fell in 1979, how the U.S. lost a very valuable ally in the region as far as intimidating and keeping what we call stability in the region for the extraction of oil cheaply. And then when the Shah's regime fell in Iran, Israel's military subsidy by us just went out of sight almost overnight, within weeks. So the shift was to create within Israel, and cooperatively, they were definitely not resisting, but to create another nuclear-armed or very well-armed pit bull to help watch over the oil reserves of the region, because everyone else is, I guess, unreliable. So there are very important economic reasons why we see this media bias. One thing, if they're an ally, I'm meaning that the leadership is compliant with U.S. needs and demands, and we would tend to, or our media would tend to demonize and dehumanize anyone in conflict with them. So I just wanted to bring up quickly say that we were talking about the difference between the coverage of this conflict and the ongoing conflict between the Ukrainian supposed separatists and the Ukraine pro-Western Ukrainian government as it stands right now. Just think about if Israel right now was a Russian ally and was treating its immediate neighbor or a contained population. Do you think that the coverage, if Israel was a Russian client, do you think the coverage would be any different of their actions in Gaza and the West Bank?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, it's really not funny, but I mean, it would be so glaring.
yeah. The perspective is, it's all perspective manipulation, propaganda, and distortion and slant. It's just taking the same facts in the same situation and pose it somewhere else, and it can be 180 degrees.
Sure. Whether it's somebody who's in
interpretation
your sphere or who's not.
Yeah.
Because what we're using, the media is the main product of corporate media, of course, is just advertising space for big corporations. It's not really designed to give us meaningful information, the product that they're selling.
Yeah.
They use the information to hook us, and then you're there to get bombarded by ads. So has a built-in conflict of interest. But one thing that corporate media is they are doing in this role, they are really trying to manufacture our consent, to use another Chomsky term, or engineer our consent to what's happening on the ground. I think Netanyahu just on Friday, or the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces requested to be majorly resupplied with bombs, munitions, weapon, basically ammunition for their ships and tanks, and immediately I think the Obama administration complied, and we're going to send them, basically limitless new tank shells, tanks, munitions. All they have to do is snap their fingers, and which they would have to quit if we stopped giving them more, stopped giving them the munitions.
Well, that's interesting what you said, that it's not a viable state, that basically Israel would collapse without aid from the U.S. But, again, with the media bias, there's a very interesting article here titled, "Israel's Military Censors Demand Prior Review of New York Times Gaza Reporting." Following its reporting of the latest events in the Gaza Strip on Friday, including available details about an IDF soldier captured by Hamas soldiers early in the day, the New York Times was contacted by Israel's military censor and told that future reporting related to the capture would need to be run through its office before publication. The military censor informed the New York Times that further information related to the soldier would have to be submitted for prior review. Journalists for foreign news organizations must agree in writing to the military censorship system to work in Israel. This was the first censorship notification the Times had received in more than 2 years. It's not, but certainly not the first by a long shot. Israel's policy of placing gag rules over foreign correspondence is well known to reporters who have worked in the country, but rarely acknowledged by U.S. outlets. In response to the notice given to the Times on Friday, the Freedom of Press Foundation, which advocates on behalf of journalistic freedoms, tweeted its advice to the newspaper. The New York Times has received a censorship notification from Israel. They should refuse to comply. And that, the clip we saw just a minute ago just also shows very clearly the censorship, the bias, and the outright blackout of information.
Yeah.
Israel was not allowed to see the footage of the Palestinian boys being killed by the Israeli soldiers.
In their own domestic media, they won't.
Yeah,
they
were not
show
allowed
it.
to, and it didn't make it into the U.S. press, any of the mainstream press, but it was shown all over Palestine. So what effect do you think that's going to have? So it's just so blatantly distorted.
You can see why the Israeli leadership would want that censorship to occur, because they're in the process of doing the same thing. They are trying to shape their own domestic public opinion to allow for this kind of mistreatment of their neighboring and basically Semitic common population. Genetically, there is no difference between a Palestinian and an Israeli citizen. They are one and the same Semitic people. When, with modern DNA testing, it's been shown it's all cultural. There's, biologically, there's no difference. So the bizarre, disparity between is completely culturally derived. But just as another example, this is this weekend's Wall Street Journal, and you can see on the top article, it says, "Ceasefire collapses. Obama blames the Palestinians," or blames Hamas. And the bottom article is, "Missing soldier provokes anguish." And I looked through the entire Wall Street Journal. There was not one article and almost no reference to any Palestinian objectives suffering, any reference to them as human beings, virtually nothing. So to our business press, they have so little value that they do not even deserve mentioning.
Well, and this was, a standard procedure. I mean, certainly in any the Iraq War or Afghanistan, you don't hear about the local people there being killed and the bombings and the effect of the bombings and the people being blown apart and the hit by drones.
Right.
You know, you don't hear that because that is not convenient. Just like you can't see the bodies, or not allowed to see the bodies coming back because that's too real.
The U.S.
you know.
service personnel coming
Yeah,
back. And
yeah.
whatnot. Yeah. Yes, those are some of the lessons that our leadership learned from basically from the media coverage of the Vietnam War, where you ended up with the embedded journalist who's basically in totally, you know, indebted and you know, to the whatever section of the military that they are riding with. They're not allowed to objectively travel and really report on the meaningful issues.
Well, that's the great irony of you know, did we learn anything from Vietnam?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
they learned a
lot.
lot, like how to continue war and keep it out of the press.
Yeah, the
know,
perpetual corporate
and-
capitalist industrial
Didn't
war
learn
for
a damn
profit.
thing about you know, not invading countries or avoiding war. They learned how to do it secretively and manipulate the press more. You know, those lessons well learned.
Right. I always remind people it's hard to hear and it's a little bit disturbing, but when you live inside of a cult of greed, even if it's a worldwide, far-reaching cult of greed, things are going to be messed up in there because the incentives are wrong. All of the biases are there. I mean, it is one of the ugliest ways we could ever organize ourselves to have the most virulent and greediest among us shaping all of our policy. I mean, things are going to get fucked up. There's no way around it. So, you know, that being said, our job is to keep pointing out these biases and what, you know, structurally what's happening and why it's happening. So, yeah, thank you for helping me do that, Arthur. So, we have another a really good article here on, it's called Gaza's Besieged Civilians. The attacks on them continue and the U.S. government rallies behind Israel. And it's another documentation of reporting over the last couple of weeks and the instances in which, you know, Palestinian deaths are mentioned as related to Israeli deaths. And it's you know, another example of the ongoing and heavy bias that exists in our corporate media. Well, do you have any last thoughts, Arthur? Oh, one thing I want to point out. Did you hear Obama's statement on Friday about we tortured some folks? You know,
I saw that quote.
yeah. Oh, well, he said it in the White House press briefing, and he was referring to the CIA in the aftermath of 9/11, finally admitting publicly that not only did we torture some folks directly, not with proxies like they've always claimed, but that the CIA has finally admitted after years too that they were spying on the Senate committee that was involved or responsible for investigating their behavior.
Admitted that.
They have admitted
of course,
that,
denying it for a long time.
Yeah, they're calling for the CIA director's resignation and whatnot, and we will get into that later. Do you have that last video, Jim? We're about out of time.
Bullhorn, that is the state-sponsored Russia Today program, has been deployed to promote, actually Russia Today Network, has deployed to promote President Putin's fantasy about what is playing out on the ground. They almost spend full time devoted to this effort to propagandize and to distort what is happening or not happening in Ukraine.
All right, this has been Critical Mass TV. Arthur, you have one more quick statement?
Well, just yeah, pay attention to Gaza with, keeping in mind what you're hearing in the mainstream media.
Thank you and good night.